I'm so glad you took the time to come out on a dreary day because it was going to be beautiful, remember? Thunder. But this is a history of the Graylag, from the very beginning and to the preserve. Now I'm Liz Dimick, I'm president of the Historical Society Board. And Graylag has been very gracious to open up this facility for us and to give you a history of what has happened here. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Ann, and she will continue. But thank you so much for coming.
All right.
Welcome to Graylag, everybody. My name is Ann Deely. I'm the director of the Nature Preserve here. Graylag is now, its current incarnation is a nonprofit nature preserve. And we're going to tell you the story of how that came to be. I'm so grateful to the Historical Society for generating all this interest. It's so nice to see you all. And of course, I'm so excited and happy to have the four daughters of the founding families here. So we have Marie and Tisha Kuzi, we have Susan and Melissa Guide, and they're going to tell you all about their story of growing up here with the camp. All around you are photos, a lot of the old photos from the Kuzi and Guide families. We put them up on the wall. They're going to tell you the stories about them, but when we're done, take a look at the photos because they're really great. We also have some buildings available for you to peek in and walk around to. If the rain holds off and you're interested, I'll tell you which ones you can go. And we do have guests in some of the other cabins, so you need to be careful which ones you go in. But anyway, welcome, and I'll turn it over to Susan.
Hi. Welcome. Thank you all for coming. And I'm Susan Guide, and the reason I'm starting the stories is that I am the only person left living who is here at the very beginning. I was born 31 days before Graylag opened for the first time. And I was supposed to be the first camper, but there was a fatal flaw in that I was a girl. And then girls continued to proliferate among the founding families of Graylag. So anyway, when my Uncle Bob died, who was one of the directors, he was the last person who remembered those early days. And so what I'm going to do is give you a little bit of insight into how Graylag came to be in those very first years. And then the other three daughters are going to talk about specific experiences that they had here. But first of all, who's been to Graylag before? Wow. And I know someone lived at Graylag. Raise your hand, please. Yeah. Oh, yes, we have several people who live at Graylag. We have friends. Did anybody, I know we have one counselor from Graylag. Any other counselors? Raise your hand. No? Yeah. You have one counselor? Any other staff members?
I had two brothers that worked here from Grant Graylag.
Oh, great.
Billy Blackie and David Blackie.
Oh, yes.
That name was Kuzi.
Kuzi, that's right. Yeah, because he shot and ran like Bob.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So, well, we've got a good selection of people who visited and worked in one way or another here. And one of the things that I like to tell people about Graylag, and especially when I show them the picture of the four directors over there that you can look at later, is Graylag really started in Queens, New York, which, as you know, is part of New York City on the western tip of Long Island. And all four of the original directors my grandfather, my father, my uncle, and Bob Cousy grew up in Queens. And so that's just kind of an interesting tidbit that somehow New York City got here. And how these people from New York City got here is really quite an interesting story. My dad, who was the older of two brothers, got out of the Navy in the spring of, he was discharged from the Navy in the spring of 1946. And he went home to Long Island to be with his parents and his younger brother. And my grandfather, Jack, was an electrical contractor in the New York City area. And he was also kind of a frustrated architect. He could envision buildings and he could build pretty much anything. So it wasn't just electrical contracting, although that was how he made his living. And he desperately wanted my father and uncle to join him in his business. But boys will be boys. They had no interest in doing that. So my grandfather said, well, what do you want to do? Because, well, I want to be in business with my sons. That's the main thing I want. So tell me what you want to do, and we'll do it. My father, who was sort of a leader, his younger brother was more of a gentler personality, but my father was always full of ideas, not all of them good, but he had this one idea that was very good. He'd been very involved in Boy Scouting growing up and going to Boy Scout camping. He loved camping and the outdoors and everything about it. And so he said to his dad, I want to start a boys camp. And his parents said, okay. They sold everything they had. They sold their house. They sold everything and went looking for land. Well, so this was the summer of '46. By November of 1946, they had assembled the essential parcels of land for Graylag. They came up here in the spring of '47 and started building. My dad and uncle lived with the Stimmels while they were first building things, but then they bought what we call the farmhouse, which is the house that's just been redone on Clough Road, and with a wonderful young family in it. Now we're thrilled. But they bought that house, and that's where the family lived while construction was starting. The first two buildings that were built were a workshop type building, which still stands, and what we call the main house, which is on the top of the hill. And I was born just in time to come and live in that main house together with my grandparents, my parents, and my Uncle Bobby. So it was a pretty wonderful time. And so I remember as buildings became built and new things began to happen, because things happened, sort of over time. And since my grandfather had liquidated his entire, every penny he had was in Graylag. And we did okay for the first couple of years, but then there was sort of a drop-off in the number of campers. This was not good news. And so my grandfather decided, okay, what we need is some sizzle, like an athlete. Let's try boxing. And through his contacts in New York, he got this boxer to come up one summer. Boxing wasn't really a good idea. That didn't last. And by this time the money was going down and down and down. So then his next idea was, well, how about an up-and-coming rookie on a major sports team? And to my grandfather, it didn't matter what that was. It could have been baseball, it could have been football, it could have been basketball, whatever. But he went looking, and right about the same time, Bob Cousy, who was an up-and-coming rookie with the Boston Celtics, was looking for a camp to invest in. And that's how it happened.
Oh,
They made a deal so quickly. My grandmother kept a diary for decades. Not every day, but she would, write big events. And, in her diary is the story of going up to Maine to meet Bob. He was doing, we figure, a clinic up there. That's what we decided last night, which is why he was there probably. Went up in the fall of, that would have been 52, made the deal, and Bob designed these very specialized basketball courts that are a certain size. They're not professional size, they're not school bus size. They're something he devised. And he said, we have the deal. The only thing is that we need the basketball courts by the time we open next summer. So basketball courts were there. They grew in number, grew to be the largest floodlit basketball courts outdoor floodlit basketball courts in New England, and had a beautiful grandstand, and you'll see all that in the pictures. But it was a terrific, terrific place to grow up, even if you were a girl. And these other ladies will tell you a lot about that. I ultimately ended up going to Camp Ida Pines on Bow Lake, so there are a few summers I wasn't here.
so did I.
Yeah, there were quite a few dances with Graylag, yeah. Then eventually I started, as soon as I was old enough to work, I went to work at Johnson's when in the summer I was 16, and scooped ice cream there for many summers until I went to college. And of course the big thing at Johnson's was we all worked nights because we wanted to go swimming and do all the things at Graylag during the day. But the added bonus of working at Johnson's at night was that all the counselors from all the camps in the region would come in on their nights out of the cabin. So there were many flirtations, romances, and, over ice cream. It was really terrific. And lots of friends that we all made at Johnson's. Some of you may remember Elaine from the A&P. Anybody? Elaine and her husband would come in almost every night. They'd each get a cup of coffee and split an English muffin between them. And her husband would always say to whoever was working, "Are you working hard or hardly working?" And then, of course, various friends of ours who worked at Johnson's got crushes on Graylag counselors, and it was just an amazing time.
Never talked to them, too shy. But we always had a crush. Always had, oh, you'd be a different guy every summer.
Oh, that's not the story you told last time.
So there are just so many stories. One thing I wanted to call your attention to, though, is some of the buildings that are no longer standing. And many of them have been beautifully redone as the Midway cabin. This is the most recent cabin that was built when it was still a camp. And it's now Ann's office and sort of the beating heart of Graylag Nature Preserve. But there are some wonderful buildings that we'll show you pictures of as we go through the evening as we're milling around talking. But there was a very large dining room kitchen with a crafts room on one end of it that was right down by the lake. It's where the fire pit is now, if any of you have seen the fire pit. There was an infirmary, really its own little building that was up on a little rise behind where the new fancy outhouse is. That location. The stables were basically more or less right across the road here. The riding ring down here. I'm getting some nods. People are remembering.
The grandstands.
Oh, the grandstands are so beautiful. We have pictures of those up here. There was the outpost, which was the cabin with the youngest boys. It was just beyond where what's called Birch's is now. And it was the original administration building for the camp. And then after the office was built, which is now the Bower Cabin.
Our favorite cabin.
Everybody's favorite cabin. But yeah, I remember when we all first came back after not being at Graylag a long time, and Carl was working on the Bower Cabin, and we each went in and stood. This was where my dad's desk was. This is where my dad's desk was. But now it's quite something else. But you know, that came along a little later. And the camp store is no longer here, which is where candy and shower shoes and postcards home could be purchased on certain nights. And what am I missing? The archery range.
Oh, yeah, the 10 cabins up on the hill.
And
Is
all
it
the
10 up
cabins
there?
up on the hill, yes, 10
There's
cabins.
there's a few left.
There are a couple left, and one has just been renovated and opened this summer. You couldn't believe, if you as a counselor remember some of those little tiny cabins, the first ones. We have some pictures of those too.
The docks down
Those cabins, those first cabins, I never believed could be reclaimed. But the first one has been renovated, and I would move in today. In fact, there's somebody living there the whole summer this summer.
Oh, wow.
Oh, you're the person.
Yeah.
We call you the moon guy.
Yeah, the little guy.
Yeah, we can begin.
So,
Have you other lists?
How many cabins were there at the peak?
well, there were the 10 on the hill. There was Midway, which is where we are now. There was what was called the dorm, which was for the older boys, and that's the Birches, which is the cabin just beyond us. And the outpost, which is no longer standing. So that's what, 14?
Then there was a big bathhouse as
Yes.
well.
Yes.
Latrine.
There was a big latrine up on the hill, and also a bathhouse, changing house
Oh,
down on the
Down on the
waterfront.
water, yeah.
Where
I was talking
Carl-
about the one on the hill
Yeah.
where there were showers and.
That's
Yeah,
why all the boys had to walk to
Yeah.
go to the bathroom. all night.
Exactly, yeah.
Yes.
And in the auditorium, well, what I call the auditorium, it's now Lakeside. There was
yes,
a stage on one end.
yes.
Yeah.
So
That must have been
Lakeside was actually the first building built, and it was built as a shop, you know, where the vehicles were stored and where the big machinery was. But later on, we called it the rec hall. And so it was where there would be rainy day activities and movies on Saturday nights, and sometimes, and there was a stage built, a real stage with a proscenium. And there were talent shows and all kinds of things that I think you'll learn about from my fellow Graylag girls. But, and then at the part that is the actual lakeside cabin was that was housing for the kitchen staff. So it's quite changed. Yes?
Did most of them just get taken down because they were too old, or did something else go into place?
Well, Graylag went into a sad period where, and we don't really know that much about it, and we're hoping that you can help us understand that period more. But some of those buildings got so damaged. Basically, we had sold to the Boy Scouts across the lake.
Do you know when?
There was a sale leaseback. So we wanted to sell because the time was right and they wanted to buy it. But we wanted to be able to stay on the property, not running a camp, but saying goodbye to it and auctioning off a lot of stuff that the Boy Scouts didn't need because they did tent camping. So, so that was in 1970 that we sold, and that was the last summer, maybe it was 69. 1970 was the last summer that Graylag operated. And then we vacated in 1974. And after that time, various people moved into various buildings. None of us understands exactly how that worked, but some of the buildings were really damaged, and I don't know whether it was by the people living in them or just from lack of care. But the big mess hall, the dining hall, kitchen, crafts building was one of the ones that had to be taken down. I think it was still here in some form when Carl bought the property.
It was. There were a few people who fixed it up enough so that they could use it and live there. But yes, it needed tons.
So, so the mess hall came down, the infirmary came down, and the stable.
And the outpost.
And the outpost, yes. So, but considering the number of buildings that were here and the number of buildings that are still here, it's quite amazing what has survived. And now the renovations of them are so beautiful. It's just staggering. I mean, they're more beautiful than they ever were because they were built to be, just rough and ready places for boys. And now they're places for families to come and enjoy nature and also have some creature comforts that, 8 and 9 and 10, whatever-year-old boys didn't really care about. So it's been an amazing transformation, and my sister and I remember how we reached a point where we could never come back. It was so sad, we couldn't come back. But Tisha Kuzi, whom you'll hear from in a moment, was the bravest of all the kids of the first families. And Tisha would come every year when she was a teacher in Florida, and she would come up and visit her parents in Worcester every summer and come up here no matter what. And finally, one summer, she called Melissa and said, oh, there's somebody at Graylag, and his name is Carl, and he really loves it, and he's going to take care of it. That was our introduction to Carl. And, but actually, we were still afraid to come, afraid of what we would see. And so we put that off for years and years until my father died. And my father died in the winter of 2005. And he had always said he could never bear to come back to Graylag. But when he was dying, he said, I want my ashes scattered at Graylag.
Wow.
So the first thing we did after we mopped up our initial tears was call Tisha and said, call Carl. We're going to have an amazing memorial service. And that summer, in July of 2005, we did. And Tisha was here for that. And it was utterly amazing. So now both of our parents' ashes are here, which goes to make this an even more amazingly special place for us. So we'll be glad to go through the pictures with you when we're all finished talking, but I think I should turn this over to my fellow Graylag girls. And we decided, since I'm the oldest and I started, we're going to go to the next oldest, who is Marie Kuzi. And
it's really fun to have a former counselor here, and I will say this is a childhood growing up here that's so unique and has been so special, and it really helped shape us, I think, as people, and some lifelong friendships, and just the memories every single time we come back. We just go over the same, just evoke so much emotion and the same stories, and oh, remember this and you remember that. So I'm going to share, actually I think I'm going to share a couple stories, because Susan talked about the rec hall, and I have to say, we used to play down there and during siesta, and we were pretty creative gals, I guess. And we just played a lot in the woods. We had clubhouses in the woods. we played in the playhouse, in the rec hall with the stage, and we would just make up little shows. And we would practice them all summer. And during siesta, the guys that lived in
Blackie.
yeah, they would like look through the cracks in the backstage and listen to us and, you know, little comments. And so there was this kind of a fun tease us, but we persisted. And then I don't know how we did it. I'm sure there were a lot of campers like, we have to do what? And they would come and we would put on our little show that we practiced literally all summer long. Spent so much time, and some of it I think has to be pretty silly from what I remember. But, you know, but they were great guys, great, you know, and they clapped, and we did it again the next year.
Said, if you go down there and make any cracks, I'm sure the
I'm
counselors.
sure they got threatened.
These
But
girls are gonna put on this show.
They were great guys, and some of these guys we still know, living around the country and hear from. And when my mom passed, we heard from some of the people who were here as campers all the way through counselors. So it was very, very special. But the other story originally was going to tell you is right before Parents' Day. Now you have to think about it. The kids are up in those cabins. Yes, there are showers, etc. But I think the 4 directors were a little concerned about how well these kids, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds, how well did they clean themselves up in those showers? So right before Parents' Day, down at the docks, we were banned from coming down into the camp to stay up at the main house, but we would sneak peeks, and it was skinny dip day. Now, this is going to be appalling in this day and age because of environmental issues, but it was scrub head to toe. And you could jump in the lake, and that's how the directors made sure they smelled nice when their parents showed up for Parents' Day. Now, of course, we would never do that now, but at the time, you could hear them having a blast, just raucous laughter. And I just remember being up there and we were like, can we see anything through the trees? We could get bigger phone here and there, but really not enough. We didn't really get much education that way. But it was always kind of a fun thing.
When you were talking, I was going to tell this story, but I'm a retired school teacher, and my husband and I now spend like 4, 5, 6 months with my dad because he's still living in Worcester, Massachusetts. 94, going to be 95. And his story, he was just telling this the other night at dinner. He, of course, now they make millions of dollars. So they don't need summer jobs, any of these ball players. But it was just a natural course to have a summer job. And so he thought about it, and he had done a lot of radio shows with each city he was in. And he always said, well, I'm thinking about opening up a camp. So, you know, write me, and I'll let you know if we do open a camp. So he had tons of mail come from all around the country, but a lot from New York and Boston. And so when he met Grandpa Guy and your father, he said, he didn't have any money to buy half the camp. Because back then, I forgot the beginning salary. When he retired, it was like $30,000 was his end salary. So I can't remember what the beginning was, but he didn't have money to...
It was about 9,000.
9,000 he started with to play. And, but he said, and he went to the car, and he got a huge bag of mail. And he plopped it down, and he said, can you, is this okay if this is how we start? And this is how you'll have a full camp. There's a picture here of the original camp. It's right this one. I don't know how many kids are there. Do you know, Susan?
No, because that includes staff.
That's the whole camp,
and
the first year. So we came after that, a couple years after. But it was full the next year.
Yeah.
I think it was 125 campers
Yeah.
every year. Could we take any more than that? I can't remember. So that was that story. And then, what was the other story I was going to tell?
You were going to tell, we just talked about this.
Oh, I know.
I know.
All right, so my dad was, he retired from the Celtics,
Oh,
then
yeah.
he coached Boston College for like 6 years or something, and then I was still in high school, and he took a job that he couldn't refuse. It was like 100,000, that was really big
Big money
time.
in those days.
So he took a job coaching the Cincinnati Royals in Cincinnati, so I moved out there for my high school years, and we still had a camp going on. So we figured it was 1970. My dad couldn't remember the year
69,
this
70.
happened. But you know, you have the training camp at the beginning of all the seasons. He had the bright idea of bringing the Royals to here for training camp, out in the woods. So there's probably about 12 players and maybe some staff came, and they put them in the lodge, because that was called the dorm, and they waited to the end of the camp, and it was a 2-week basketball clinic every year. And a lot of the counselors stayed, and then people would come in who was just interested in basketball. There were no horses or archery or waterfront or skiing. It was all just basketball. And so I said, well, Dad, how you had all the team members here and all the boys for counseling, for the clinic. And he said, yeah, somehow it worked. We would schedule games. They did have 4 courts or 3 courts?
3.
There were 3. And somehow they were scheduling the games, and it all worked. But Smitty, you probably remember Smitty had to make all the bunk beds longer because these guys were like so tall. And my dad laughed because he says, and a couple of them had made the All-Star game that year. So here they are at the All-Star game in hotels, and then the next week they find themselves in the And I remember, what was his name, Sam Lacey was afraid of the water, he never swam.
He'd never been in a lake, never been in the woods,
Never been in the woods.
never seen such dark.
Here he is.
City kid, no, we don't want a city kid.
Yeah, so, and we were all working by then, so we must have been around 16. That's when we started working at Johnson's Dairy Bar. And so we'd come home at night, and I remember one time they played such a joke on him, because he was so afraid of the dark, and we kind of counseled him on the way back. We stopped our car, and I remember they used to play jokes on him and all that. Sam Lacey was funny. So,
That was a one-time thing.
one-time thing.
You never see another NBA
No, I don't think
team
any
doing that.
NBA teams go out in the woods and do that. So that's my 2 stories. Now listen, it's yours.
I mean, I could go on for days telling stories, but I have a story about Sunday nights at Graylag. It was campfire night, and we'd get in the back of the pickup truck with my dad, and we'd go to all the sites where the kids were going to have their campfire, and we'd bring the box of hot dog buns, marshmallows, and so then we'd come back and our family would have our cookout by the office. And afterwards, we all got to be fire chiefs and go check all the campgrounds, all the fires, and we'd ride down and we'd go and inspect to make sure they're all out. And then they opened the store just for us afterwards, so we got to go and have candy and whatever we wanted from the camp stores. That's one of my stories.
You know, Melissa, I didn't think about it, but that actually also gave the kitchen staff a day off. Which
Yeah.
was,
Yeah.
otherwise they really, before
Have a
that,
day
they
off.
didn't even have a day off.
And another job we got to be cabin inspectors.
Yeah.
Tisha Marie and I, and my sister Barbara, we'd get to have a clipboard, and we'd have to go in and inspect, make sure everything was folded nicely, your bed was made, and at the end of the week, whatever cabin got the most points got to go to Johnson's for ice cream. So we were in charge of that. But this was a magical place to grow up. It's embedded in us. My sister in California wishes she could be here too. But we just have such love for this place and always will.
Were there any other questions or anything? Would you like to just, yeah.
Is Johnson still around?
Not the Johnsons we worked at.
Much more sophisticated. Got a brewery now.
Yeah.
Yes,
It was really fun.
Yeah, there was actually a small chain of restaurants in southern Maine and New Hampshire called Johnson's that had nothing to do with our Johnson's.
That's right, that's
But the
true.
chain bought our Johnson's,
Yeah.
so, and now there's the brewery too.
What is right across the pond? There's like a couple of lean-tos, it looks, there was like a
That's
walkway.
the old boy, that's the Boy Scout camp.
Boy
They
Scout.
were driving, there's another whole pond on the other side of that hill. And we used to hear their bugles sometimes, or sometimes you hear activities. But I hiked it when Carl was, because Carl used to hike it all the time over there. And I went all through, and it's still, I guess they don't have the money, and camping's not big right now, or Boy Scouts have a lot of lawsuits, and I know there's a lot of turmoil in the
The
scouting.
camp is more of a private camp now?
Oh, is it?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
That's
they're
A
doing-
lot of
they're doing
land.
a lot of work over there.
Yeah.
And the Adams Pond is the other pond that's there.
Adams
And
Pond.
they actually, it's almost like open to the public now.
Oh.
And then you
Right.
can go down, let them know you're there, you have to walk down, it's probably maybe
Wow.
half a mile in,
Mhm.
and it's beautiful.
Interesting.
And they have kayaks there, and
Yeah.
and they allow you to take them out. Yeah.
And the biologist had a question, I think.
I did, yeah. So, I know what a Graylag goose is, like as in like the type of wild goose.
Right.
But I'm curious as to how this camp got the name Graylag.
Oh, Susan would know.
I know the answer to that one. My grandfather, I adored my grandfather, and he was a lot of the brains behind the founding of this camp, but he was kind of tone deaf when it came to marketing, and as in bringing in the boxer to be our athletic director. So he wanted to name it the camp Dartmoor because he thought it sort of sounded like Dartmouth, and that would give it. That was fine until
Yeah.
someone informed him that a major ancient prison in England.
Got more?
So that was the end of Dartmoor. And then they just kind of started working off the name Wild Goose Pond, and okay, what can we do with that? And a Graylag goose is a particular kind of goose, and
That lags behind.
flags behind.
It's true. And
Yeah.
they've been losing in this lake forever.
No, really?
Yeah,
Yeah,
oh,
that's, we remember.
Yeah, they've always been really special to wait for them to,
Yeah.
to
And
be
they came
here.
up for us, we walked to the point
Yeah,
yesterday and sat
yesterday.
out, and two booms came right up for us.
Yeah.
And then last night, they were so loud at 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
And then 6 o'clock this morning, they were
Yeah,
really
they
talking
read,
away.
yeah. Yeah,
Where was the store?
right next to the
Bauer,
office.
which is Bauer.
Bauer.
Yeah.
It was,
So were there buildings between here, how dense were the buildings?
it didn't, in walking through today, and we've already explored around, it's hard from a child's perspective, everything felt far away, but actually things were a little closer, but the woods were denser. Carl has made some, he's done some amazing things with revealing rock, etc. But here, for instance, this would have all been dense woods right up to here. It was a pretty long walk, I think, originally, like say, from the office all the way down to the dorm until this was built. I don't know, what else would you say to that?
Yeah, I don't know, it never felt that dense even when all the buildings
Yeah,
were there.
I
I think because, the woods
So
were
treed.
so enclosing. But the camp store was tiny. And
It
it was just beyond Bauer on the same side leading up to the hill cabins.
Right.
And it had the big kind of windows that open up so that,
Little counter.
yeah.
Yeah, it's just tiny.
And the cabins weren't on top of each other. There was good space.
There was some
between them.
winding of that road.
And a few of them have been taken down, but really, the majority of the buildings is still standing.
Yes.
There's 3 up there.
And there's a
Well,
few
three
more
of-
that
right.
still need a little bit of renovation.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah.
And they used to be full of, when we'd come back, or even after Carl bought Graylag, there'd be old bed frames and mattresses
Yeah.
in them and just tons of stuff
Yeah.
that all got carted away.
As you said, Carl was like the perfect person to be the caretaker of this land. Fran, how many years
He
was he
did it
here?
justice.
Was it like 20, 30?
26.
26. Yeah, because I remember knocking on that door and he just, you know, I was like the sacred cow or something because I was, you know, one of the past people coming back. But it led to this whole thing, and my parents had come up here, my mother's had passed since, but they came up and spent time with Carl and.
My husband and I
Yeah.
used to come up before Carl a couple times, and we camped on the beach. Because I don't know if you were in the house or not, but I would never trespass
think anybody
anyway,
was here then.
but I
Yeah,
remember.
As soon as I left, Carl came.
Oh, we did.
So then, but this would be
But I don't
before
remember anyone
that.
sleeping on the, I think I would have noticed.
My husband, yeah, we brought a tent up, we were living in Boston, I live in the West Coast now, but, and put a tent up and foraged for firewood up in the woods, stepped on a beehive. But I'd always be telling my husband, look, and this, and this, and this, so it was,
Yeah, we all, it's in our
learned
heart.
how to horseback
It's like it's
ride
in your
here.
heart. It
Yeah.
never leaves you.
It doesn't.
I still dream Graylag dreams.
Me too. Me
Yeah.
too. And every time I come down, I have to drive really slow and open the window so I can
Yes,
see
smell and.
everything, even
Sense
though
it.
I've driven down that road hundreds and
Yeah.
hundreds of
It never
times.
leaves you.
Yeah.
And now people write these amazing letters in the journals, right, Ann? Yeah, the journals are amazing. I've been reading some of them. Yeah.
Well, the other thing with Carl is that Carl really elevated this place
Right.
to a whole, new transcendental kind of level.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody else could have bought it and turned it into a camp or turned it into a, giant Airbnb. But Carl had a vision that was so different and so much far beyond
Right.
what, our families had. And that's part of the miracle for us. It's not just that we get to come back and visit, but we get to come back and visit a place that, while it's the same place we've always known and loved, it's a place that is doing so much more in the world.
Yeah.
And that's
People get to be off
just
the
And I have
unbelievable.
Graylag rocks on windowsills
I
in my
know, I
house
love
that in Seattle. With the mica shining, and
Yeah.
it's like a little altar and different, so, yeah.
But now this is a camper who can tell firsthand, right?
Yeah, there were a couple of things I just thought I'd add. I mean, I have many, many memories, and the way I marked the year I was here until now, I won't forget tonight. It was 1961. The way I mark it was Marilyn died in 1962 when I was in Los Angeles. So that's how I
Wow.
remember the years,
Yeah.
1961. But I came here, I was at least 2 inches, maybe 3 inches taller, but I wasn't a basketball player. I was the waterfront director.
Oh! I might have taken swimming lessons under you.
Probably, I was thinking that as you spoke.
Tadpole.
Yeah, tadpoles,
Tadpole
Tadpoles.
swim.
something
And
in
sharks.
Yeah.
And what I remember is a lot of time alone down at the waterfront. I came up here, driving up in my car, thinking, I'm going to change the world. This is not going to be a basketball camp. This is going to be, the focus is going to be on the waterfront, where all summer camps are supposed to have their focus. Well, good luck. I got here and the limo pulls up and out steps a kid that was 3 inches tall. Bouncing the ball, he's 13, whatever it was, 12 years old.
Yeah.
And then Illinois license plates, and there were more than one that came out of it. I don't know whether they drove all the way from Illinois, but they came from a distance for the camp. So I knew I was toast right at the beginning. I spent a lot of time, private time, at the waterfront, and yes, we probably had lessons. I do remember that summer because, for a couple of reasons beyond what I've shared with you. But that was the year that, those of you old enough remember, Chuck Mednarik clocked Frank Gifford. And Gifford couldn't play?
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. He was up here and spent time, I don't know how often he
He's
came
friends
as a
with
guest,
my-
but do you
He
remember?
was friends with my
You're friends
parents.
with my
He
parents.
stayed with your parents?
Yeah.
And he would come down to the beach, he and his first wife, not Kathy Lee,
Yes.
but his first
Right.
wife.
Right.
he would come down to the beach, and I didn't understand what he was doing with his time. First of all, he was supposed to be recuperating, but he spent all his time chasing his pretty blonde wife around and tackling her. So that was my day at the waterfront.
His wife, when she was Miss America or something, his first wife was like some Miss
She
America
was a
or
really
something.
wonderful woman.
Yeah, she was very, she was very pretty.
I don't remember, but I remember that story.
The other thing I remember, other than lots of personal memories, was I was playing basketball with all the counselors in general, or it seemed to me and the arts and crafts instructor were the odd people out. All the other counselors came from colleges. They were playing college basketball for the most part. I shared the dorm with Jerry Friel.
Oh, yeah.
And last time I heard your father's voice in person was, I went to see Jerry, and this would have been a few years ago because Jerry passed away.
Yeah.
Think. Jerry was a favorite of, I think.
He was the assistant coach at Boston College when my dad coached.
Yeah, he was
Boston College,
assisted with your father there, and then he became longtime head coach at UNH. Yeah. So anyway, Jerry, I went to see Jerry. I went to UNH, and Jerry picked up the phone. He says, "Who's this, Jerry? And you're never going to guess who's here." Well, yeah, I didn't expect him to guess. I was here 1 year. So he explained who I was, and they had a little conversation. Put the phone on. We had a short conversation. But anyway, it's getting away from the story. Jerry would play basketball every night. I would play on the courts, but I wasn't a basketball player. I played lots of other sports, and anyway, I got a assignment. We were playing the game pickup, and Coos was there. He was here all the time, which astonished me when I thought about him playing for the Celtics. He's here all the time, or it seemed all the time. I'm
He
sure
was
he
here
went away
7
on
in the
business
morning
trips, he
till
had
about
things,
10
but
at
he
night.
was, yes. But he was out on the courts playing, and for some reason we had pickup game 5-on-5. I think it was 5-on-5. I don't think it was 3-on-3. It must have been 5-on-5. And I was guarding Kuzi. I'm not a basketball player. I fashioned myself one of the world's greatest athletes, but our coach of that pickup team called us over and said, "Come on, we got a huddle here." I go, "Jim, I think you think you're pretty good, but you're not going to guard Kuzi." "I can handle it, coach. I can handle it." So we changed, but that was remarkable to me to have him out there all the time, and obviously that was part of the camp's
Absolutely.
allure, part of the draw. But he was there, and
Their
that's
dad and Bobby and my dad were down early morning. They had their breakfast with the kids, lunch and dinner.
Someone had to be on duty.
If we
at night.
wanted to see our dads, we had to come down to the office
Visit.
and visit.
Yes.
Or, yeah.
They'd come
Every
back
day we'd
after
come
we
down.
were asleep. And then there was an officer of the day, so one of them, by that time my grandfather had retired, so Bob Cousy, Uncle Bob, my Uncle Bob, and my dad were the three officers of the day. And then Jerry Friel got to be such a trusted counselor and kind of next in command, so then Jerry Friel was put into the officer of the day rotation.
There were a lot of campers that basically came here to camp at 8 or 9 years old, loved it, and did come back all the way to they were counselors. Some of them we had crushes on. I did date a couple a little bit. But I know, like, as I said, when my mom passed 10 years ago, we heard from some of these people. I get emotional about this, but, so they were in our hearts, really. It wasn't such a big camp that you didn't get to know the kids that were here.
I was just going to add on to what Jim was saying. There were so many camps who had professional athletes involved with them, but they were figureheads. And that was, it was not usual to have what we had here with Bob. So anyway.
He loved it.
So anyway, I used to live on the land adjacent to Camp Graylag, belonging to my Aunt Lou Tucker. That western shore, up to the big boulder, then the stream.
Yes, I know.
Yeah. So I spent from like 1962 to 1970 when I left also. And I was when the local kids, my brother worked here, but I wasn't old enough, but I remember as a little kid watching the big city kid cars. I remember that little farmhouse down the end of the road, you want those little kids?
Yeah.
But anyway, you played an important role in my life because when that land came for sale across from Camp Graylag, because see, I hung out on the off season.
Yeah, right.
Local kids, and I did my share of ransacking, you know, looking for cigarettes. And,
Yeah.
But anyway, so it played an important role in my life because I got to get the land across from Camp Graylag, and because of it, there was like 30 years of stone that I got out and I built, and I became a stone man. But this place,
that's
I
cool.
grew up on Wild Goose Pond.
Yeah.
And so I brought one for the Guide family and one for the Bob Cousy. I'm not a basketball fan, but I seen some film of him once.
Yeah, pretty amazing stuff.
Wow,
Yeah, he was ahead of
that's
his
what they're
time.
looking at. I don't know who he is,
Yeah.
but I've got a book, a special book, Life on Tilton Hill Road. It talks
Oh,
about Wild
yeah.
Goose Pond. Have you seen that book?
No, but
I've seen Carl's copy.
And my Aunt Lou left me all the town reports, so I have an 1890 town report in Pittsfield, and I have a student package for you. I'm gonna give one to this family, one to this family, and I'm gonna
Thank
give
you
one
very
to
much.
Will, because he's the loon guy.
Yeah.
I feel bad about all the sinkers, the lead sinkers I put in this.
Brilliant fun.
I think you had a question from way
Oh,
back.
actually, I was just going to make a brief comment. So we're much more recent. We've been coming for about 7 or 8 years now. And just a couple of comments. First of all, it's become an incredibly special place to us just over that time. And we got engaged here, and just like it's an amazing thing. It feels like coming home. And in the first few years, it was fun to sort of see Carl and then walk the property, and he would say, here's what I did, here's what I'm gonna do. Oh, I'm gonna build this big crazy stone thing out there that you can walk through next year. And then we walked up on the hill into the boys' cabins, and he's like, yeah, listen, I want to show you these, and we're gonna start renovating these. And it was just like, what a blast it was just to sort of walk with him and hear the vision, and then come back the next year and see it done. And
I know, to
but anyway,
see
so
him
we'll never
revealing the land like he did,
Yeah.
like just revealing this beautiful rock, and it's the artistry is, never mind the manpower, but all of it is just amazing.
Fran, this was his playground, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because I remember coming with my husband, and we spent a summer here to help it get ready for the new vision. And Randy he put his foot in his mouth, because we're riding around in the gator, and Carl had placed every rock just perfectly. And Randy's like, oh, I can clean up those rocks for you. Carl didn't talk to me, and he says, you don't let him touch anything about it. Because everything was placed sacred, and so my guy was not quite the nature guy he thinks he
Right,
is.
Carl was a naturalist, and he upped the value of the whole neighborhood.
Yes, and it's all a watershed now, right?
Huh?
Carl made it all a watershed, so it's kind of protected a little bit.
He upped the value of the neighborhood
Yeah.
considerably.
And also introducing back native plants. Down by the waterfront, for example, there's that native plant garden. That's where the bathhouses and changing rooms and our resident raccoon used to live. But, he took that all down and put new plantings in and all around.
All the trails.
Remember the cave and all the horn pouting we used to do when I was a kid? The little cave, the ledge
Yes.
coming out?
Yes.
We used to have a fire under
We
it.
call it the point,
We
and
call it
I
the point.
remember the fire.
Yeah, we always have fire and stuff
And
under
we
there.
used to haul them out like crazy.
My first kiss was down at the point. Bobby Griffin.
She's revealing all of it.
You girls told me about
Good.
it, and
My
you
mother
told me
would
it was
clean
a
them.
cave.
Yeah, it was the cave, yeah.
And
Called it that too.
if I'm in the dentist chair about to have a procedure, that's my happy place. That's what I meditate on and kind of bring myself back to is the point. Yeah.
And another comment about Carl and my dad is, ironically, they shared the same birthday. So it was just like, it was meant to be, that's how we looked at it.
And the way we found that out was the day of my father's memorial and the scattering of his and my mother's ashes. We were leaving the next day, but we were sort of eating leftovers from the big war with Carl out on the porch. And he said about, just in July of that year, and he said something about that he was born in September, and I just had this feeling like, and I said, what day in September? He said, oh, the 20th. It's all,
Pre-cosmic moment. Yeah, pre-cosmic moment.
and where was he born? Well,
Oh, yeah.
he was born in Manhattan, not Queens, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, New York.
Yeah.
So something you might like to know is back in 78, 80, I managed a bank in town and I was president of the Chamber of Commerce, and unfortunately I still am. But I get a phone call one day and it was from a set director and he says, I'm down in York, Maine, we're filming a movie and we just lost our site of a log cabin on a lake and I need it now. Do you have anything in the area? And so I said, well, if you come up, I can take you down to Camp Graylag and maybe it would work. And so he says, well, do you mind if I bring Roger Moore with me? Because he wanted to see the site because they're really nervous about this. It had to be that week.
Right.
So they came up, I brought them down, and then we looked at the cabin right on the water down here, and they liked it. He says, do you mind if I have a film crew come? And I go, sure. I didn't even know who owned it. I didn't think anybody would mind. And so they brought the film crew up, and it turned out they found, it was between this and another one in Maine, and they used the one in Maine, unfortunately.
Oh, but
But
pretty cool.
the movie is called Bed and Breakfast, and it was Roger Moore and Mary Steenburgen?
Yeah,
Ted
Steenburgen.
Danson's wife.
Oh, yeah.
And, but yeah, so I did get to go down to the set and meet all of them and everything, but that was pretty cool, but almost happened.
No, there was an actor, who was the actor was in Mission Impossible?
Yeah.
And his son came, what was his
Yeah,
name?
Philip Morris.
Philip Morris. Remember that? What show was it that he?
It was Mission Impossible.
Mission Impossible.
Yeah.
His son came.
His son came for one summer. That was kind of fun. That's kind of a claim to fame.
And I remember your dad, when he'd get a phone call, he'd get on the loudspeaker and he'd go, calling Philip Morris. Just like the old commercial.
Yeah, yeah. A little humor there. Yeah, my dad always, he's humorous guy.
Yeah, he's over around.
So, too bad it's raining because the cabins are and walking around, Ann, would have been lovely.
But good decision, Ann, coming inside.
Yeah, good decision. It's gonna be out by the water, yeah.
It's just a shower.
Yeah, yeah.
I always say.
And I did bring umbrellas next spring.
This is more rain than we've had in Seattle, though.
Yeah, oh,
Parents' Day.
I know.
Was there ever an attempt to form an alumni association? Did anyone ever try to?
We all said we were gonna come back with a lot of campers, but
We've talked about that, but we've never really
never did.
gotten our acts together.
We've lost
Kind of
contact.
contact.
She's in Seattle, I'm in Florida. You were local, Yeah, the reunions didn't happen. Carl would have loved that though, because he had talked about.
But who was it? Fred used to know. Fred who had, Fred had been a camper, I'm blanking on his last name, but he had a girlfriend who was a country music singer. And they would come up and stay here.
And they came here every year.
Yeah.
What were their names?
Fred.
Is he still famous now?
His wife is, she's still singing.
Oh.
Yeah, and she would sing down at the country western place near the Epsom Circle.
Clyde and Willie Mae Joy? That's who was down at the Epsom Circle. Clyde and Willie Mae Joy.
Clyde and Willie Mae Joy? No, that's not the name, is it?
No, I don't know.
Yeah.
She was also a very good fisher person.
Yeah, the little reunion.
We'll put you in charge.
And I live
Great,
nearby
Ann.
now. I live now nearby now, so.
Yeah.
Somebody asked if Johnson's was still here. I don't know.
I did.
Yeah, it is definitely still here. We had dinner to make the occasion a full occasion. We had dinner there, had something to eat before we came, and we're going back for ice cream. We're open until 9 o'clock. I don't know the hours, I know it's the ice cream is delicious. I'm sure you'll all have
They
it.
give you a huge amount.
We got you now, right?
Yeah, way too big.
Yeah, don't get anything more than the kitty.
Yeah.
Serving. It's huge.
That's right. No.
I think they close at 8 o'clock, so.
Well, you got an hour, a little less.
The girl had the counters at 9.
I think we have Larry. Larry, I think Larry on it. Can we have just one more minute? The gentleman's been waiting to.
Because you know Carl and you, yeah. You're right.
It might be interesting, a little story. When I was in high school, for about 3 years, we came up here and played ball, but it wasn't basketball. We were just country hits that had no coaching, and these were giants. But we were pretty good ball players, and so we played baseball against them. Several times. And your father played shortstop once. And he was amazing. He had these extra long arms.
He does, and he has pretty big hands. He actually wanted to be a professional baseball player. If you looked in his 8th grade little autograph book, that's what he put in 8th grade, that he wanted to be, a professional baseball player.
We were trying to hit the ball past him. And then he stopped everything. He became a great baseball player.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
kind of a natural athlete. He played very good tennis, he played golf.
Plus he had great peripheral vision, that's why all the
Yeah.
behind the back
Big
passes,
back.
because he could see like here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
I really just want to thank you all for coming out. Thank the four of you so much for doing this. This was so interesting. You're all welcome to stay. There are refreshments in the back, photos to examine, and if you're feeling intrepid, I think that if you wanted to, you could walk on down to the water, down the driveway here. Lakeside is open if you wanted to walk inside and look around. That was the
People
old
can
rec
meet
hall.
in the Bower too. We'll be sitting there, safety.
That's very nice. So Bower is it's the next cabin on the way down, and that was the office. And it's now a rental cabin. And the Lakeside is the one right beyond that on the corner.
I'd like to make just one announcement. The Historical Society, which is in Pittsfield, on the corner of Oak Street in Maine, has an excellent display of items from Graylag. So if anybody is interested, we're open the second Sunday of the month between 1 and 4. If you really wanted to come in some other time, you can call our number and we'll make arrangements for you to visit it. But it's the big yellow building on the corner of Oak and Main. So please, if you're interested in any of the artifacts from Graylag or even from Pittsfield, come on down. And please have some refreshments.
Have you seen the museum?
No.